Look at the guns on this guy. Come on, get that gun up, man.
No,
this guy's got. Look at those. Look at those. I mean, are you kidding me? Come on, man. I mean, you and I got to train together or something. We have to go out and we got to go to the gym.
We are training together.
Yes, we are.
We're
working on a
warriors
project.
of the soul for the world.
Yes, absolutely.
And we are working on a wonderful project.
It's a good. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Yeah, we're going to talk about that a little bit and talk about an excellent letter that Patrick wrote to the Chinese government, and it's really, really terrific because I wanted to bring him on, and the honor and the morality and the ethic behind writing this letter in a response to something is just wonderful. I'm looking it up here because I'm going to read it as soon as I can find it here. It's in my system somewhere, but I wanted to chat with him about that. But hey, look at
there's no telling what's in your system either.
No sugar. I've been sugar-free for 5 weeks.
That's great.
Yeah, man.
I'm 2 days off of hemp milk lattes, so
there's a lot of sugar in that.
With an extra espresso.
Oh,
that's what is required for manuscript.
Oh, is that really
proofing?
Yeah. Maybe a little shot of brandy in there too, huh? Yeah.
Well,
it
Prairie Scotch. Have you ever had Prairie whiskey?
No, I haven't had it.
It's actually really good stuff, and 20% of the purchase price goes to the preservation of the Great Prairie.
The prairie dogs.
Smoothest whiskey I've ever seen in my life. I'm a very discerning drinker and rarely drink, but I went to Whole Foods and I got a couple of things because we were redoing the office. And like some organic vodka and some extraordinary
organic
tequila.
vodka. Explain that to me.
Well, organic is, and particularly when it's certified, is it comes from soil that has had no chemicals introduced for up to 7 years, and it comes from, in this case, potatoes or corn, which is what vodka is most prevalently made of, and that's organic as well. So they don't put any pesticides on it. I mean, me personally, I've bought nothing but organic things for about 50 years, and I was raised on an organic farm, even though my father didn't call it that. He never would have fed animals or crops or anything. Some of the stuff that goes on this stuff now. I just think the stuff tastes better. And
you can taste the difference between
there's no question the difference
regular
between
whiskey?
inorganic. I was going to say egg.
Yeah,
an inorganic egg and an inorganic apple. I'm not saying they all don't taste good, but generally I can really tell the difference. And the vodka, I just would rather err on the side of it's not just your own health. You have to understand that these chemicals that are put into the topsoil for major agricultural endeavors not only screws up our topsoil, which is in a dire state anyway across the country, but the environmental accidents that are involved with agricultural workers are, and the payouts for that are astronomical. So in effect, when you get a inorganic head of lettuce, maybe it costs 90 cents. And an organic head of lettuce on its surface costs $1.99 or $2.10.
Right.
But in fact, when you factor in the environmental workers' payouts that they have to make, the fact that it's probably introducing some known carcinogens into your system and what you're going to be paying out of healthcare costs in your lifetime, inorganic things are not less expensive. People go for the quick, but I come from the theory that if you expand your lifestyle a little bit, the universe is going to respond. And particularly, we shouldn't be putting stuff like that into developmental bodies of children. They really need to have really, really pure food and water. For example, in our schools, we got organic food into the school system in Santa Barbara. And here's the thing, it wasn't more expensive than the regular stuff that the Department of Agriculture shoves at our schools all the time.
Right.
That was a great program in the 50s and early 60s because excess agriculture was sending stuff to public schools. But somewhere along the line, it became a conduit to all this chemicalized stuff.
Well, everything has sugar in it. I mean, that's the biggest addictive process. We're all addicted in America to sugar. We are all addicts. I mean, I've gone 5 weeks now without sugar, about 90% no sugar in my diet, and I have addiction problems to sugar. After 3 weeks, I found out I was craving sugar all night long, especially at night. Always wanted sugar, 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 sugar. Go find something in the stores today that doesn't have sugar, even organic stuff.
There are three cereals in all of Whole Foods that don't have sugar
Right.
in them. The Ezekiel brand has two varieties, and oatmeal. Those
Yeah.
are the only ones that don't have sugar in
And
them.
and if you've always had oatmeal that has cinnamon or sugar or whatever in it, and to eat oatmeal that doesn't have sugar, just oats as an oatmeal, it's really tough to eat that.
It takes an adjustment.
A big
on your
adjustment.
taste.
And in fact,
well, I
did you
think
know?
sugar was put here by God, just like everything else.
Well,
it's
of
just
course.
a question of modulation
Well,
and moderation.
sugar comes from the sugar cane.
Of course,
and
it's a healthy food.
It's healthy. It's in the stalk of the sugar, like
Exactly.
bamboo stalk, and it's brown, creamy color. That's what it looks like, and it's not. You can chaw on a sugar cane all day long and not be addicted to sugar because your body is taking in
Exactly.
a natural organic substance, and you don't get addicted to it. Like tobacco. Tobacco is not addicting. It's the nicotine that they spray in it and the toxin that made it addicting, that made people buy cigarettes over and over, and they realize that. Well, sugar's the same way. Do you know that the reason why sugar is white is because it's
It's refined. Yeah.
and this is how they refine it. This is this is crazy. They take the sugar stock, they put it in a hot bath of water. It gets moist and breaks up. They stir it all up. Then they drain the water, okay, and then they crush the sugar stock, okay, and they put it in small little granules, and then they spray it with bleach, the same bleach you wash your clothes, your
That's
whites
crazy.
in.
It's insidious.
That's what makes it white. And then it loses its sweetness. So then what they do is they add corn syrup to it and syrup to it in another bath and break it up again because it dries out hard. And they break it up in these machines, and that's how we get powdered sugar. That's how we get white sugar, and because it's processed.
Right.
And so sugar itself, you're taking in toxins. The chemtrails. What are your feelings about the chemtrails? You talked about the dirt, the soil. That's got to be doing something to the soil, don't you think?
The topsoil, from what I can see, is in dire straits. We used to have feet of topsoil.
Right.
Now we have like 5 or 6 inches, and it's really depleted. It's kind of like your own bloodstream becoming highly polluted, and it's not being. Some places of enlightenment, like Colorado, they figured out early on, certain places in Colorado, that they had a tradition of beef cattle. The whole law structure and everything was around the ranchers. Well, somewhere along the line, they figured they could make just as much money from the influx of new pioneers buying second homes there, and preserving the environment meant something. So they came up, but they didn't want to give up beef farming and farming, as we don't want anybody to either. But they came up with very inventive crop rotation, getting cattle to move from one pasture to another. And it becomes more problematic when you're talking about billions and billions of steer, but we have to do that to a point, or you end up with incredibly depleted beef sources, incredibly depleted land sources and resources. And nothing really devastates land worse than just cattle that are just left on. If they're not shifted around, and different crops learn to infuse the soil again. So
one of the things that you mentioned when you start talking about beef is that you hunt. I like to hunt.
Yeah, of course.
Sport hunting, and field dress, strip it down right there, open it up, clean it up, and start cooking it right there.
Sure.
And when you eat wild meat or wild meat, it tastes vastly different, and so does beef. One of the things that they do in the slaughterhouses when these commercialized manufacturing beef industries, what they do is once they open the cattle up and they dress it and the whole 9 yards, and the beef is hanging there ready to go into the freezer, they spray it with sugar water because it preserves it and makes it taste better.
Sweet, yeah.
So when they sell it to Kruger Markets or Stater Brothers or whatever, Piggly Wiggly's out of Chicago, Piggly Wiggly's.
No, it's a Southern thing too.
Yeah, it was in Chicago too. I mean, all through the Midwest. What they do is it tastes better. So if you've ever had beef that you shot on the plane, and then dress it there and taste it. It's vastly different.
That's why the Argentinian stuff tastes so, because it's grass-fed.
Grass-fed.
You really shouldn't be eating any beef unless it's grass-fed.
Well,
not good for your system.
Beef isn't good for you. It stays in your system for a long time. You don't pass it well. It creates all kinds of things.
Some beef could be a good.
Well, protein is good.
Protein is good, and one of the reasons man had the brain power they could was because Europeans could kill mastodons with spears, and Pacific Islanders could fish for fish, and so they got enough protein to make their brains expand. So it's just a question of balance.
You didn't know you were going to get a history lesson, did you, today? Patrick Kilpatrick, great actor. Man, the guy's been in everything. You've seen that handsome face. He plays good guys, bad guys. He plays shadowy guys. He plays guys that stand for virtue. He's done just about every kind of parts you can think of. Is there anything that you haven't played in film?
Oh, of course. Any actor has virtually hundreds of jobs that they, because there's really probably too many actors and too many talented people for the amount of, that's why so many of us had to go into production of our own things. Right. And it's a good time to do that. The tradition actually of a producer actor is very old, as before the Shakespeare time, you know, the Greeks. So any artist or any creator or business person has to be creating their own things, because otherwise you're at the prey of
everybody else.
Everybody else.
Yeah.
So there are actors I know that all they do is act, and that's their complete.
I suppose if they're getting $20 million a picture, that's all you need to do.
Well, no, but you know, the universe takes care. If you have a liberal education, generally you're going to end up getting involved in a lot of different things. Some people are so specialized that the universe takes care of them, and that's all they end up doing.
Like the gentleman who just passed away, Gunny Sergeant Emery. He was specialized into that drill sergeant kind of mode because it was natural, because he was a drill sergeant. And that scene in Full Metal Jacket just solidified him forever. And
I'm thinking of Michael Rooker, who's a buddy of mine, and Michael's very forthright about saying, you know, Patrick, you're crazy and amazing that you do all these other things, because if I had to do that, I don't know what I would do, because acting is all I do. Yeah. And
diversification has something to do with it. You got to be kind of across the board.
Even if you're really busy as an actor, you're going to have some downtime. So I think you need to find other things to get involved in. Is that the letter?
That's the letter. That's the letter.
Maybe we should set this up.
Okay, let's set this up. Well, first off, one of the reasons why I love this man so much is because he's an American, and everything that you think an American should be, in terms of how he feels about this country, his history in this country, his family, being honest and honorable, the things we were raised on, especially my generation and your generation too. And the next generation, you know, people are trying to do that, but where we came from, you know, America meant something. It meant something different to our generation than the preceding generations to follow. And he's got a lot that he stands for. And he wrote a letter here recently. Patrick has a production company. He makes films. And that's what he does. Fine actor and a producer, writer, director, and makes films. And part of making films is you have to get funding, especially in today's world, because the major studios, they only fund these big cartoon movies, I call, with the giant 100-foot screens, green screens and stuff. They don't really
television shows.
Yeah, television shows. They don't really make movies that have a lot of storyline and a lot of thought-provoking thing. That goes to the independent production, the independent producers. And so Patrick is an independent producer, and he's got a terrific movie, several of them that he's working on. And we'll chat about that. But we have to find funding. And so in setting this up, you're always looking for people or entities or groups or companies or whatever to provide you funding. And there was a group of people in China that wanted to bring you over there to network and to do some things. And you lamented on going over there or not going over there. So go from there.
Well, I mean, it's actually a common thing because, and look, there have been some famous Hollywood movies that were funded by money laundering. Cotton Club comes to mind. There was a lot of, the problem lies in a lot of people are so anxious to get their movies done. And they're not, there are a couple of things that happen. One, they are not schooled in the sacred trust of actually returning an investor's money and getting them into profit. They come out of film schools a lot, just raring to go with their film and at any cost to get their movie financed. What I would say, just back up just this bit, because you have to ask yourself, where is this money coming from? You have to ask yourself, there are a lot of persuasive arguments. For example, we are doing something with a country in Africa. And I'll give you a hypothetical. What if somebody gave you $10 million in blood diamond money? Okay.
Right.
Now, there are many persuasive arguments to take that money and to turn it into something good. That's one persuasive argument. The other could be somebody's going to do it, which is the old drug dealer rationale. I might as well do it because somebody is going to do it. There are a lot of good things about taking that money, say the blood diamond money, and saying, I'm going to train all of these people in this country, and I'm going to create a storyline that's really uplifting and all of that. And that's sort of a moral dilemma that anybody would have to ask themselves. Does the money violate the Patriot Act? Where does this money come? To some extent, governmentally, we're going through this now. It's like, where does the money come from for the Facebook ads that came from Russians that were attempting to, I think, very ineffectively, and I think it's a non-story, but they were, where does money come from is an important question that a filmmaker or business person has to ask.
And how corrosive is it?
Right, because there's a place where you can really lose your soul and spirit because you're rationalizing things. There's a famous movie called Mephisto, which is about a guy, and it's based on a true story, that was a tremendous classical actor, and he was a darling of the Third Reich. And so they funded his massive productions.
Right.
And Klaus Maria Brandauer won an Academy Award for playing. It's a great movie. I recommend it. And the question became, he was like, I'm an actor. Why? What are you asking of me? But the truth is, he was bolstering the Third Reich, even as he was doing these monstrously effective and grand theatrical productions. Well, in this case, one of the things I do is I teach, and we've gotten into it sort of working with foreign countries over the years because I was always looking for locations to film in. And so as a consequence, you start working with that particular government and everything else.
Yeah,
and
because there's tax advantages.
There's
and
tax
lots
advantages
of
and there's a lot of
right
reasons,
to work places. And
aside from the dramatic venue that is perfect for the movie.
Putting the production together.
So in this case, I've gotten a reputation as a guy who can teach the pillars of filmmaking, acting, writing, directing, and producing in some of these places. And that's a great conduit to meeting influencers and people that can then fund your money, your films.
Networking.
Right. So I was asked by the Chinese, a group of Chinese investors to come. They had a big studio facility that they wanted to bolster, and my films would add a great deal to that because studio business, you want to have a pipeline of work so they could run the my slate of films through their facilities. And part of that component was to teach and all of that. And so as a first step, they would have me there, paid for by these investors, but also 50% paid for by the Chinese Communist Party.
The Communist government.
The Communist Party. And because everything that happens in China is not only okayed for, but is somewhat funded by the Chinese Communist Party.
Well, the concept is money never goes from top down. It goes from bottom up. So when you go there to do business, everybody's paying somebody off all the way up to the top. That's just the way it's done.
Absolutely. Now, look, I'd be willing to say the Communist Chinese Party, look, they had a massive job to do. This is another rationale. They had a massive job to do. Billions of people. How do you lift billions of people out of poverty and create a stabilized society when it was a mess? I mean, you're talking millions and millions of people dying in the Cultural Revolution and all of this.
75 million.
From the excesses of Mao and all this other stuff. Well, one of the things they did was they passed a law that nobody could be a dictator. Well,
wait a minute.
What did the current president of China do? He made himself president for life.
And then Putin did the same thing. So,
exactly.
Come on.
Well, I don't call those guys presidents.
No.
I call them dictators. And just like Putin, Wall Street Journal the other day, the Chinese government is sending out essentially hit squads to hit their critics around the world.
Yeah.
Just as Putin poisons these people who are dissidents.
Almost like the North Korean little fat boy, Rocket Boy, sent out hit squads to kill his family in airports.
So given an environment like that, I have no place, and everybody has to make this decision for themselves, but I have no place taking 50% of the money to go and teach something that bolsters and props up that regime. It doesn't matter that, here's another persuasive, our iPhones come from China. Our Facebook comes from China. And these big corporations all acquiesce to it.
Right.
They all, I could go further with it.
Yes.
I've been asked to write the Declaration of Consciousness. Okay? Listen to this.
For China?
No, for the world.
For the world.
So, and I'm a Virginian. Steeped in the American Revolution.
Before we go there, though, can I read this letter that you sent back? Would that be okay?
I mean, yeah, of course. Sure.
The reason why I want to read it because it capsulizes everything that you just said, but you put it in such a succinct way of expressing your philosophy and the concept of who you are from a totally, absolutely patriotic and American understanding.
Which embraces an understanding of being a human being in the world.
Right.
We are a human being in the world. And it's not just a selfish Americanism. If America goes down, if America is totally compromised, then
we're left with dictators.
We're left with nothing.
Tyrants. That's what we're left with. Now, this just is a terrific letter, and I posted it up. I got a lot of hits on this, but I'm going to read it real fast. It's not that long, but he says to this lady, he addresses this lady, I won't mention her name, who brought the deal together. And he says, I'm writing this to you.
Who happens to be a Chinese American, by the way.
Right. We both know her. And I'm writing this to you in response to your offer of flying me to Beijing to teach and serve as a liaison to Hollywood for your group. Now, your offer and your effort was indeed interesting and compelling, deserving of consideration and thought. Now, that said, I cannot participate, and this is why. Now, listen closely, guys. We talked about this when you were going through this. We had a conversation.
Yeah, I really had to go through the whole process to try to arrive at what was the right thing to do for whatever the greater good was to do this, because, as I said, there are a lot of compelling reasons which, for me, become rationalization.
Right. Well, yeah. And a lot of people rationalize things that they shouldn't be rationalizing in that respect. For the simple reasons such an effort bolsters the Communist Party and its dictatorial control of the Chinese people. It represents a spreading economic and political vision to the world which is inconsistent with global freedom. This is particularly true with the current dictator, which we call him, has been recently installed by the Communist Party as president for life in a manner appalling to free people everywhere. These are great and powerful statements that you're saying to this representative who passed this on down the line, I'm sure.
I'm not so sure, because they may get sent to a re-education camp just for passing it along.
Yeah, she might not be able to go back there, right?
Yeah.
Possibly. Well, we certainly hope that doesn't take place. But now it goes on. This is in particular true also when American corporations such as Apple, Facebook, etc., have acquiesced to such unmitigated and undemocratic cash and carry power. This is my decision as an individual, as an American, and as a passionate human in the world we live. It is not the first time I've made such a decision. Once before, I was approached by a group from China who wished involvement in film funding our projects. Upon investigation, it was revealed that the corporation brought their influence by persuading global countries to not recognize Taiwan. These are great points that you're getting across in this letter from a point of view that I think is very fresh to understand, but is lost in our culture today.
Well, I think people are distanced from the actual history of the situation. It goes back, China has existed for thousands and thousands of years. They forget that we were their allies in World War II. And they fought a great struggle between the Communist Party and Chiang Kai-shek. And whether Chiang Kai-shek and his cronies were oligarchs or corrupt really isn't the issue. The people of Taiwan separated themselves from that and have set up a vibrant democracy. Mm-hmm. And so, and by the way, Nixon going to China
73
acquiesced to the one China policy.
Yes, he did.
He sold the Taiwanese down the line. Mm-hmm. And that is inappropriate in the same way that Stalin, Churchill, and FDR, in a very real sense, sold the people of Eastern Europe down to 70 years of slavery until the collapse of the Soviet Union. That is a bargain that should not have been made. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. In my humble opinion. I'm sure the Hungarians and the Poles and the Yugoslavians and all the people of Eastern Europe did not appreciate having their destinies confined to Stalinism.
I don't think so.
No.
Especially with Stalin killing over 25 million of his people after World War II.
Well, it worked out after 70 years, but that's an entire lifetime for people in slavery when that deal with the devil should not have been made.
Furthermore, he says, Patrick says to this representative, I stand with the Taiwanese people in their efforts to be free of mainland control, just as I stand with the courageous Kurdish people in their desire for an autonomous homeland. And it goes on and on. I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's a lengthy letter, but he says, Patrick says, I'm a son of the American Revolution. My ancestors fought in the American Revolution against the greatest empire in the world at the time. My father fought in World War II against tyranny of Japan, in which China suffered greatly under the barbarism of Japan. And so, you know, from a point of view where you're talking about, it's such a powerful and impactful letter. I posted it up, guys. Go read it because this will kind of give you an idea of the kind of thinking that made this country great, because this is where we need to go, in my opinion.
Well, I agree with you, and one of the reasons I wrote it is because if we don't speak up, even at great cost sometimes, certainly I didn't pay a big price because I've got plenty of work to do, but the bottom line is, if we don't speak up about these issues, then the conversation is so mutated that our kids won't even know what the conversation is.
And that's part of the problem. Our kids don't even know how to do push-ups and pull-ups anymore. They know how to get big, fat, strong thumbs, maybe carpal tunnel syndrome later on in their life, but they can't think cognitively or out of the box or abstractly or anything. Language is becoming less and less, and passions are taking over.
I'm hopeful that and whenever I've talked to young people in the American military and even young people in secondary schools, and these things aren't lost, but they need to be reinforced by people who have the ability to speak out and to say things. I mean, let's say, do you realize that nobody's going to cry for him, but Richard Gere can't get a major studio movie because of his advocacy for Nepal.
Right.
You know, which is the Chinese took the Nepal. Now, I think it'll be a cold day in hell when China gives back the highest place on the planet because strategically they want to hold on to that.
Right.
But he can't. And so our American studio movies, our studios, are bowing to that economic pressure and not using an actor who's fallen afoul of the dictatorial ways of the Communist Chinese Party. So I don't need to go to China until they need to straighten out their Communist Party.
Well, there's a big fight right now with India and China right up there in that borderline area where the two countries come together. They're bombing each other and attacking with tanks and military. The media doesn't cover it at all, but they are actually engaged in battle right now and for the last year.
Yeah. Well, one of the most persuasive rationalizations are, well, America's not perfect either, you know, and America isn't. But nobody goes to prison. Well, very rarely does somebody go to prison because they voice opposition to the political hierarchies in this country. Yes, we need to look at our justice system and reform it. And yes, we need to do an awful lot of things in this country. But that experiment and dialogue is not morally relevant to a society that has hundreds of thousands, even millions of people in slave concentration camps. Yeah. And you are disappeared if you even move away to another foreign country and criticize the government.
It's even more so than slave concentration camps. They have whole towns and villages that they go in and they say, you are a Ford Motor Company town. You are a Apple town. You are a IBM town. This is what you are. And the whole town, the whole city, 10,000, 15, 20,000 people work at that plant. They live at that plant. They're guarded by the troops that they can't leave without a passport, essentially. I mean, they just don't enslave. They enslave people in labor practices and everything. These are other stories we don't hear about. So, I applaud you for that, man. That's just a great thing. That's just a great thing to do. But this also leads into some of the films that you're doing right now that have a real kick in the pants statement about something. And we're doing something you're called Burn Off.
We are. I'm always hesitant to talk about those things until they come out. But it's true. Well, let's say to the larger issue. I sometimes look at the film world and the media world and I go, this is what you devoted your life to? I mean, we're only here for a fraction of a moment's time, okay?
Right.
And it's like, why would anybody devote and because Jesse, we work really hard.
Yeah.
You have to be really passionate and commit and sacrifice and do a lot of things in order to do what you do.
Yes.
Why would you do that for something that's meaningless? I don't get it. Some people go, I just want to make a buck. And that has its place.
Yeah, but not in this business.
No, it's just, so yes, a long time ago, being a good actor in a lame movie lost its luster for me. And I've managed to raise my kids and they're gone to fine schools and they're superb young men. And I don't want to spend the rest of my days working on anything. And yes, the issues that we're talking about play directly into what we're talking about.
Yeah,
For example, I don't want to give away any plot lines. Plot lines.
Yeah.
You'll have to pay attention, but we've got a movie coming up and a couple of Amazon big kind of projects coming up that deal with some very interesting issues. And you are so adept and have been such an enriching force to what we're doing by your historical knowledge and the interlacing lattice of events that are connecting. And to be honest, I have to tell you, you have profoundly influenced how I think about things. Because one can't just think about things as a Mr. Smith goes to Washington patriot American. One has to think about the historical lattice of entwining relationships that encompass our entire globe.
Yeah, we just got notice that Barbara Bush died. The patriarch of the family. Yeah, 92.
She had 1 day of comfort care.
One day of comfort care.
1 day of comfort care.
Well, at least she had that, and she was able to make the conscious choice for herself.
It's not very popular in Hollywood, but I think the Bushes have often not gotten credit for some things that they did that were really quite extraordinary.
Right.
And that's something that we need to speak out about, too, because the conversation in Hollywood has become way far afield from the true conversations that we should be having.
Yes.
As you know.
Yes, they certainly do. They certainly go astray down paths that have no bearing.
Well, yeah, I've been a keen observer of it for a long time.
Right.
And, fortunately, we live in a culture where you can speak your mind and you can accept the consequences of whatever that is and go forth.
Do you think that the country as a whole is going in a direction that will lead us to the same success that we've had in our past? Or do you think that the country has gone too far in one direction?
I'm ever hopeful about things. But if we aren't really speaking up and coming from a place of, you think of the things you just mentioned, the things that made us what we are. The things that made us what we are endless optimism and extraordinarily profuse entrepreneurialism and inventiveness, even in very dire, challenging circumstances. I mean, we look at today's world. My parents had to deal with the Depression, the
polio,
World War II. I mean, most people can't even imagine World War II now, and even people like yourselves, ourselves, that have studied history. It was so cataclysmic and so all-encompassing that people can't really get their head around it. But I think what we have to do is, on a very integrity and decency. It's a habit, just like anything else.
I've always felt that integrity, decency, honor, honesty, the ideas and concepts of true right and true wrong are things that are born into the energy of the universe. It's part of the makeup of the universe and power and energy. And I've often thought that people innately are born with rights and wrongs. They know that. And as we learn in our cultures what is right and what is wrong, we know that basic idea. But I think that we've kind of gotten away from that because of other people's ideas on where they want to take us.
Well, I think that's true. And you have to, Martin Luther King said, an unreflected life isn't worth living. If people aren't reflecting on their actions and they aren't seeing, there's a sort of fun exuberance to being mischievous.
Yes.
Okay. And all of us grow up with that as youth and exuberant young people and stuff like that. But after a while, and you don't want to lose that childish exuberance. But at the same time, on the larger issues, we are passing a world on to our children. And if we don't speak up boldly, and by the way, there's tremendous benefits to actually speaking boldly, because people are afraid and they think they're going to get, but what they don't realize is, at least in our culture, great forces align with you.
Right.
You know, and if you're doing the right thing or you're going for the higher ground, guess what? It gets bolstered by the universe.
Cesar Chavez was a great force for the migrant farm workers here in California and spread across the nation.
Sure.
Martin Luther King, of course, was a great leader who had an idea and a vision. And not only Black Americans, but white Americans, Asian Americans, Latino Americans, they all bolstered behind him. So, great things start with people who are willing to take a risk and stand out and say, this is the way it should be, and here's why.
And people from all different kinds of life can be patriots. People from all different kinds of life, and all different circumstances. It doesn't matter if you're from a gang family in East LA, or you're from a great family of very moneyed people someplace. And one of the most interesting stories I ever heard was there was a guy who was a complete playboy in Kuwait. And when Iraq invaded Kuwait, he buried his Ferrari in the sand. And then as the Iraqis came in, they unearthed it and they ran around assassinating Iraqis in his Ferrari. And he later became the president of Kuwait. And he had been a complete playboy, kind of sort of hedonistic wastrel up until the time his country was threatened. So wherever we come from, it's never too late to suddenly go, from now on, I'm going to do the right thing in the very, very best way that I know that I can. Now, it helps. We talked about that organic food. It helps if you keep the neural passageways clear.
Well, the chemtrails, the GMO food, the toxic water, the basics of life that we eat and we drink has all been destroyed over the last 60 to 70 years. And unfortunately, I'm of the thought that it's been done insidiously and on purpose for an ultimate goal, and that is to take over people's humanity and eventually and ultimately depopulate the planet Earth at some point in time. But, that's a real dark look at it, but it sure seems like it's going that way. And it takes strong people like you, Patrick, to get out there and say, it's not going to happen on my watch. And
well, to
I'm
the
going to
best
do
of
something.
This is a perfect example. Look, we get bottled water, and the concept of this is purity, okay? The truth is the fluorocarbons from the plastic are going into the water, and fluorocarbons are made from oil, and they're a known carcinogen. So people, you should be drinking water out of glass.
That's right.
Recycled glass, and perhaps colored green so that the sunlight doesn't hurt it.
Or blue.
These are small things that need to be thought about. And as you take those higher level aesthetic values, it can infuse every aspect of your life.
You crisscrossing across the nation like you do with all the celebrity and VIP things that you do and the charities that you're a part of, and of course the work. I mean, actors that have a history and are successful, they get to do a lot of things and go to a lot of places and see a lot of things that regular folks working a 9-to-5 job or 10, 12 hours a day don't get the opportunity to do.
That's true.
And seeing crisscrossing the country, I mean, with your optimism, do you see that America is changing from the last 20 years, that there's a swell of people on the ground level that are seeming to start thinking differently, or is it just kind of going the same old, same old?
I think it'll go the same old if we don't have leaders, and because we don't, it's really striking to me, and it became really apparent to me, particularly when I started a film company, how strong the impulse to be led is by the human race. There are leaders out there, but there's also a vast number of people who really wish to be led. And as a consequence, we have cults and we have vast religions. We have
things like called the Vatican.
Right. We have Islam. We have Catholicism. We have whatever they are. There's a great impulse on the part of humanity to be led. For me, and I think for you, a person who maybe come from rebellious Scottish, Irish, Latin stock, whatever it is, that come from sort of individualism and had examples of our parents who were free thinking people, that becomes a little bit more foreign for us. would like to hope, first of all, the leaders have to be very careful that they're leading people in good places. Because I know even myself as a leader, I can be charismatic and I can get people to do my bidding. You want to make sure that you're taking people in the and do it with humility, that I always think that leadership is putting other people first rather than putting yourself first.
Well, there's a concept out of NLP that says, neuro-linguistic programming, that says when you come upon a person, you never leave them worse than what you came upon them in the first meeting.
Give them a gift.
Give them a gift or try to make it better for them, but don't leave them in a worse position.
Yeah. Yes, and you probably get a lot more with honey than you do vinegar. Right. Except when you're in the face of really bad behavior.
Right.
Am I hopeful? I'm not so sure. For me, I'm ever hopeful, but for me, it's more about almost a personal thing for me. It's like, and I've been really enthused by how hungry people are for people who will speak up and who will be. And it's not a national thing, and it's not a country thing, and it's not an American thing. It's the people on the earth break down to decent or indecent. That doesn't mean sexual mores. It doesn't mean drinking mores. It doesn't mean anything like that. Are you a good-hearted, decent person who wants to do right by the environment and yourself? That's really what it comes down to.
Most people on planet Earth want good health for them and their families. They want to be able to support their families with food and water. They want to have a place to live that's safe and sound. They want better for their children than they had. They want to be able to live a life of quality, not so much quantity. Most people aren't like J. Paul Getty. Most people aren't like Prescott Bush. Most people are not like FDR or President Trump. They're just folks that want to get along and have good family, good friends, and a life that they can support. That's it. It's really very that simple, no matter where you go.
At the same time, there's nothing wrong with somebody. You mentioned a couple of people who assembles that wealth, but in the end, what are you left with? You can't take it with you.
Right.
And if you don't have some greater sense of value to others, celebrity, let's take celebrity. It's great. You get some free shoes at a gifting suite,
right,
and you get some nice things you can give to other people and stuff. But really, celebrity, what is it good for other than maybe procuring you work or having you actually have the ability to have a positive effect on the environment in which you live? Mm-hmm. Otherwise, it's kind of a silly notion. By the way, I'm not diminishing it because you get that from working very, very hard and hopefully touching other people. Right. But if it's not turned into something that, again, what Martin Luther King or Gandhi was certainly probably one of the most, or Jesus, one of the most.
Mother Teresa was another one.
Most famous people on the planet, or Muhammad Ali.
Right.
The fame in itself is really, really hollow unless so is money.
Yeah.
You really don't have an awful lot. What I am left with as an actor and a writer? I'm left with a dedication to craft and a dedication to doing something excellent. It's not the money. It's not it's nice that people respond to it and connect to it too, but ultimately you're going to be alone in some things as you're moving along too. Mm-hmm. So, am I hopeful? We haven't got a choice.
Yeah.
You know, we really don't.
Because the other way is not acceptable.
It's a very dark medieval situation.
It really is.
People should know that 37% of the Earth's population lived in a place where free speech was allowed last year, and now it's 31%.
Yeah, it's going down.
It's going down.
Tyranny is running amok in the world right now.
And our stated goals as human beings and Americans and Western civ people and decent people should be to isolate and eliminate these people.
Now, this is why one of the reasons why we didn't get a lot of politics here, but one of the reasons why I voted for President Trump is because I knew he was an outsider. I knew he was a businessman. I knew he would shake things up, and I knew he had that brash New York idea and attitude, that he had a real thick skin, and I knew he had an idea of what he wanted to accomplish, and he's done a lot of good things while he's been president so far.
And nobody thinks that any of these situations don't have nuance.
Right.
You know, on the one hand, for example, we have Saudi Arabia, which has been an appalling society.
I think they
and
help.
You have Iran, which is an appalling society. But all of a sudden we have this crown prince who's at least tentatively modernizing things, and Trump was able to realign that situation so to counter Iran's excesses.
After 40 years of dictatorship in North Korea, all of a sudden the North Koreans and the South Koreans are going to lay down their arms and make peace for the first time.
And that's something that people should take to heart. If you stand up and you say what you feel boldly and with articulation and intelligence, great forces will align with you.
Syria is another example. The Russians bolstered and pounded their chests like a big gorilla, and we're going to do this if you do that, and they didn't do anything, and because they don't have the ability to do anything, and they know better. And China's not going to do anything either because they like our commerce. And that's why when he did the tariffs, they backed down. Now they're having a conversation, and it's all about a conversation. And sometimes you have to go about that way. But I think you tend to be a little more optimistic about things than I am in that respect, and that's terrific. I tend to be a little more cynical about those things.
I think the cynicism is there in a sort of watchful wariness, but all you can do is you can hope upon hope that whatever efforts, we do need more people to stand up for what is really innately feels like the right thing to do, and stand for freedom and stand for justice in all of its forms. We need to do that in our own country, and we need to do that all over the world.
One of the things that Lee and I talk about quite a lot is that, and his ideas are a little bit different than mine, but going down and meeting at some fair ground in the middle somewhere. And it would be nice to see Americans meet more in the middle of these very, very difficult ideas.
I think a lot of them do. A lot of them do. And, you know, we live in look, I campaigned for gay marriage in 2008 against the ban in gay marriage.
Right.
And that's, to me, felt like a real appropriate thing to do because there was the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution, and eventually the Supreme Court came down exactly that. I felt you couldn't give a right to one group of Americans that you could give to another group. So at the same time, I don't believe that the gay rights movement or the federal government should have the right to bankrupt a business simply because those people don't want to bake a cake for a gay wedding. So these things are a constant balance and a constant situational observance. I think what happens with left-right politics is excesses tip the balance one way or the other, and you have to be having that conversation and not excluding people from that conversation.
All of a sudden, in the last 10 years, we have this news media out here. They call it the mainstream media, Main Street News, and now it's called fake news or whatever. Yellow journalism, that's what...
I call it deeply biased.
Well, you know...
look, at least 60-70% deeply biased.
Yellow journalism was created by William Randolph Hearst because he was the media mogul of his time. He owned all the papers in the country, all the main papers in all the main cities. So, I mean, this is something that goes back a long way, the bias of advertisement, promoting, and news and all of this. We just happen to, the technology can bring it to us and bombard us 24 hours a day, every second of our lives. But the key here that I'm trying to make, the point I'm trying to make is that for people to understand that they're lighting the fuses at the ends of these stories for their own selfish reasons.
Sure.
And we aren't moving to the middle of the true story. And it's. Do you find it hard to find the truth in a story today?
It is difficult because you have, and so I would say, all you hackers and fake news people, take a look at yourselves. You know, really imagine what you'd accomplish if you put yourself on the side of truth and justice. Thieves, you know, thievery is a very, in my view, a very uncreative act, because look at all the time that good people have to spend just preserving their property because of thieves. I think,
yes.
Well, you have blocks and you have, and
Look,
the bottom line is, do you really want to pass that legacy on to your children as you were a thief or you were a hacker or you were a person who stood on those sides of things? There's so many creative options open to people. What was the question?
We're just having a conversation.
I think
so when you're putting an idea for a story together in a script, you're taking all this interesting topics we've been talking about, and you're molding it down into a story to tell. And I think that's really powerful, because in film, you can often be the ceiling, the glass breaker of these topics.
Well, every great, it wasn't always, though. I like to think of Hollywood, and, you know, you can talk about why Hollywood was what it was, but one of the most interesting things is that the early Hollywood moguls were relatively lower class guys who wished to be thought of as upwardly mobile.
They were Jewish guys that were being funded by the gangsters out of the East Coast and Chicago. Let's face it, that's what they were.
They wanted to be thought of as upper echelon, elevation.
Right.
So they created projects that dealt with elevation. Now, what we have is MBAs and people who really don't know a tremendous about stories, and really the bottom line is the most important thing. And there's nothing wrong. You ought to be able to do both. But I think great art and great novels and great movies, the finest ones, lead us to our better selves. That's what they always did really well.
Shakespeare on the woods when he was performing. These were all politically charged plays of his time.
And you can do it in a gangster environment.
Right.
But there needs to be some movement towards redemption. Not to the point where things become trite or become Hollywoodized.
Right.
But the other thing that movies and art do, and novels, is they take us into worlds we've never lived.
Yeah.
And that's what we need a lot of. There's plenty of good stuff out there. I'm very enthused about television and all the media distribution,
Prime, Netflix,
all of that stuff.
Yeah, HBO.
If it was just left to the studios, we'd be in dire straits.
We'd still be watching Bewitched and Gilligan's Island.
Well, it's not too late. Didn't they do a remake of Bewitched?
Yeah, they did with
By the way,
Will Ferrell.
there's nothing wrong with doing a remake of Bewitched.
Come on, you can't do
Listen,
Darren. You can't do and Elizabeth Montgomery.
All you need
I
is
used to dream of her.
You need a visionary like J.J. Abrams did to the Star Trek stuff.
Yeah,
a reboot. Look,
I'm jealous of you, by the way, because you got to perform. You got to act on the Star Trek stage, man. God,
a couple of them. And the funny thing about it is, while you're on there, you're going, "Wow, I'm killing it. I'm doing such a bang up job." But then you think, next week somebody's going to be in those boots.
Yes. Do I have a red shirt on? Right.
So
absolutely, man.
I hope people like my book.
Let's talk about your book real quick. We got about
it's now become 2 books because people are not inclined to read 520 pages of manuscript. So it's now become 2 books.
We okay? Got one more minute.
We'll call it the Dying for Living series. The first deals with my upbringing and with a forward look into show business, and the second deals with show business and to some extent producing, but mostly acting. So I think it'll be something that, and I've come up with a concept that I'll hold to myself that ties into the patriotism as well. The truth is, some gloriously mischievous and wonderful people have been the finest patriots in American history.
Yeah.
And
right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Benjamin Franklin and all these guys, they were very robust individuals. And so
where can I get your book?
Well, it'll be coming out. I just assembled the production team, and it's called Dying for Living.
Okay.
And there's a little bit of a longer blurb, but I'll keep that to myself.
Well, tell you what, when as we move closer to it, we'll have you back on. Let's talk about it.
You're a very fresh and wonderful mind, and I'm not saying that as hyperbole. You're my brother in arms.
$15 that'll cost you. Just $15.
No problem.
Okay? No problem. See, I'm negotiating right now. The art of the deal. Hey, the Jesse T Show right here. Patrick Kilpatrick, everybody. All right, man. We talked about a lot.
Oh, did we take a call from? Oh, one thing I want to add.
Yes. Go ahead.
Some of the cover art of my book is going to be done by a wonderful man named Randolph. Nicholas Randolph.
Yeah.
I couldn't see the thing, but Nicholas is this fabulous South Carolina artist who sent me some stuff, and it was so perfect. This is why I'm saying the universe sends you stuff. And also another cover is going to be done by George Yepes, who's one of the greatest Latin artists in the world. He's a great artist, period. George Yepes and Nicholas Randolph. I hope you enjoy their art on the cover. And
absolutely,
I'll be exercising my copywriting skills.
Love it. Catching the Vibe tomorrow with Dan the Man. Hey, check it out. We're going to be somewhere getting in trouble and getting a little mischievous, as we say here on the Jesse T Show. The Brown Beauty's off duty. See ya, Patrick. Love you, baby. All right. Woo!